You are not confused. You are sensing a mechanism you were never taught. There are moments in life when nothing appears broken, yet nothing moves forward. You wake up, you act responsibly, you make reasonable decisions, and still, something feels slightly off. Not dramatic, not catastrophic, just misaligned enough that you cannot ignore it. This is not failure, and it is not lack of effort. It is the moment when reality stops responding to what you do and begins responding to what you are broadcasting. Most people are never told this. They are trained to believe life changes through action alone. Work harder, think differently, fix the emotion, adjust the plan, improve the behavior. But there comes a phase where none of that works anymore. Action repeats, effort increases, results stay the same. That is not because you are stuck. It is because you have crossed into a different layer of interaction with reality. There are seasons where reality does not listen to movement. It listens to state. You can feel it when it starts. Conversations feel slightly out of sync. Opportunities almost arrive, then drift away. You sense answers forming before the questions are clear. Life feels like it is responding to something behind the scenes rather than to the visible steps you are taking. This is usually when people doubt themselves. They assume something is wrong inside them. They look for motivation, discipline, healing, explanation. But what is happening is far more precise. Reality is not reacting to your actions. It is responding to the signal you are emitting while you act. Every moment, your nervous system is generating a state. Not a thought, not a mood, a state. A subtle configuration of tension or openness, contraction or coherence, urgency or presence. That state moves ahead of your decisions, ahead of your words, ahead of your plans, and the field responds to that first. This is why two people can take identical actions and receive completely different outcomes. One feels as if doors open effortlessly, the other feels as if every step meets friction. The difference is not intelligence or worth. It is signal clarity. When the state you broadcast is conflicted, reality responds with mixed results. When the state is tight, reality compresses. When the state is fragmented, life feels scattered. And when the state becomes clear, even briefly, reality begins to reorganize around that clarity. You may have already felt flashes of this. Moments where you stopped trying to control the situation and something shifted. Not because you planned better, but because you stopped interfering. The tension dropped, the urgency softened, and suddenly, the next step revealed itself without force. That is not coincidence. That is alignment. There is a point in every major transition where effort becomes noise, where pushing forward actually blocks movement, where the only thing required is to stop reverting to the old way of understanding cause and effect. You are not being asked to do more, you are being asked to see differently. You are standing at a junction. One direction leads back to the familiar loop, trying harder, explaining more, fixing yourself again. The other direction is quieter. It does not promise control. It does not give instructions. It simply asks you not to rush back to the old interpretation of how reality works. At this junction, the field is already listening, not to your plans, not to your intentions, but to your state. This is why forcing clarity never works. Clarity is not created through pressure. It emerges when pressure dissolves. When you stop narrating the moment, when you stop labeling what you feel as progress or failure, when you stop demanding immediate proof. The moment you do not rush to fix what you are sensing, something stabilizes. Not externally at first, internally. A subtle stillness, a pause between reaction and meaning. That pause is not empty. It is where reorganization begins. You do not need to understand the entire mechanism. You do not need to believe anything new. You do not need to adopt a philosophy. All of that comes later, if at all. Right now, the only thing that matters is this. Do not collapse back into the old explanation too quickly. Do not rush to label this phase as confusion. Do not try to solve it with effort. What you are sensing is not disorder, it is recalibration. Reality has already started responding to a different signal, And if you allow this moment to remain open, without forcing direction, without retreating to familiar logic, the next movement will not need to be manufactured. It will present itself. Nothing needs to happen right now, except not going back. That feeling is not happening to you. It is moving through you. You may call it anxiety, sadness, pressure in the chest, a tightness you cannot explain. But what you are actually sensing is not a story and not a judgment. It is a movement. Long before the mind names anything, the body registers change as oscillation, a subtle shift in rhythm, a contraction or expansion, a rise or drop in internal tempo. This is why emotions often arrive without language. You feel them before you understand them. You notice them before you can explain them, because they are not thoughts. They are signals. Most people are taught to relate to emotions as personal experiences that belong to them. My fear, my sadness, my joy, something to manage, something to fix, something to express correctly or suppress politely. But this framing misses the deeper function. The body is not simply feeling, it is transmitting. Every emotional state carries a specific configuration of energy through the nervous system. Muscles shift, breathing changes, attention narrows or opens, the heart rhythm alters, hormonal cascades begin. All of this happens before a single interpretation forms, and none of it stays contained inside the skin. Your body is not a closed system. It is an interface, a living signal generator constantly interacting with the space around it. What you call an emotion is a dynamic pattern moving through that interface, shaping how you engage with the field and how the field responds to you. This is why emotions feel alive. They move, they surge, they pass. They are not static traits. They are not identities. They are momentary states of transmission. When you label a state as anxiety, the label arrives late. The signal has already been broadcast. When you judge it as bad, the judgment does not cancel the signal. It adds another layer on top of it. When you try to calm it down forcefully, you are not erasing the transmission. You are interfering with it. And interference is still a signal. The field does not respond to labels. It responds to patterns. It responds to coherence or fragmentation, to openness or contraction, to clarity or noise. What matters is not what you think about what you feel. What matters is the state that is being sustained underneath the thinking. This is why trying to think your way out of an emotion rarely works. Thought operates at a different layer. You can change the story and the signal may continue. You can convince yourself you are fine and the body still broadcasts tension. You can perform calm while transmitting urgency. Reality responds to the transmission, not the performance. You have likely seen this play out. Times when you said the right words but nothing shifted. Times when you forced positivity and life felt hollow. Times when you did nothing to fix yourself and yet something softened on its own. Those moments are not accidents. They are moments when the signal changed without being managed. Emotions are not commands telling you what to do. They are information showing you what is being sent. When heaviness moves through the chest, it is not demanding explanation. It is revealing contraction. When anxiety activates, it is not predicting disaster. It is signaling heightened alert. When sadness slows everything down, it is not weakness. It is a deceleration, a closing phase, a release of attachment. These signals are not personal flaws. They are functional states. The problem begins when you treat signals as enemies or identities. When you say this should not be here. When you rush to interpret. When you attach meaning too quickly. In doing so, you prolong the state instead of allowing it to complete its movement. A signal that is resisted becomes distorted. A signal that is overanalyzed becomes amplified. A signal that is allowed remains clean. Clean signals move through. Distorted signals linger. This is the subtle distinction most people never learn. You are not meant to eliminate emotional signals. You are meant to let them pass through without turning them into narratives or battles. The body knows how to transition states. It has been doing so long before conscious thought existed. When you stop interrupting the movement, the signal completes itself. And as it completes, the field adjusts. You may not notice it immediately as a dramatic change. Often it begins as a quiet reorganization. Conversations feel different, timing shifts, opportunities align without force. The environment responds with less friction, not because you tried harder, but because the signal became clearer. You are not living inside your emotions. You are broadcasting through them. This changes everything about how you relate to experience. You no longer ask, what does this feeling mean about me? You ask, what state is moving through right now? You no longer rush to judge. You listen. You feel the oscillation without adding commentary. This does not make you passive. It makes you precise. Because once you recognize a state as a signal, you gain choice. Not the choice to suppress it, but the choice to stop feeding it with resistance or story. That choice alone alters the transmission. And the field responds instantly. Not with punishment or reward, with resonance. The field always answers what is being sent, not what is wished, not what is claimed. This is why small internal shifts can produce outsized changes in reality. A slight release of tension can open a door that effort could not. A moment of genuine presence can stabilize a situation that planning could not fix. You are not at the mercy of your emotions, and you are not meant to control them. You are meant to recognize them as movement, as information, as temporary states passing through a much larger system. When you stop treating emotions as personal problems and start seeing them as signals in motion, a different relationship with reality emerges, one that is quieter, more responsive, less forced. The field is not slow. It does not miss transmissions. It does not need convincing. It responds to what is actually being broadcast, and it always answers. Trying to fix your emotions is why nothing stabilizes. There are moments when calm becomes an obligation, when positivity feels like a task, when you tell yourself to breathe, to be reasonable, to stay composed, while something inside refuses to cooperate. You have tried this. You tried to calm down when your body was already activated. You tried to stay positive when everything felt heavy. You tried to think your way out of tension. And instead of relief, life became more chaotic. This is not because you failed at control. It is because control was never the solution. The instinct to fix emotion is deeply conditioned. From early on, you are taught that certain states are acceptable and others are not. Calm is praised, anxiety is corrected, sadness is managed, anger is restrained. You learn, often unconsciously, that emotions are problems to be solved rather than signals to be read. So when an uncomfortable state arises, the reflex is immediate. Suppress it, replace it, explain it away. But this reflex creates a subtle distortion. You do not make the signal disappear. You only interfere with it. An emotional state is already a transmission. When you attempt to fix it, you introduce a second transmission on top of the first. The original signal continues, now entangled with resistance, judgment, or forced correction. Instead of clarity, you generate noise, and noise destabilizes everything. This is why forced calm often feels brittle. It holds for a moment, then collapses. This is why manufactured positivity feels hollow. It does not align with the underlying state. This is why suppression leads to sudden emotional spikes or physical symptoms. The signal was never resolved. It was only buried under effort. The field does not respond to effort. It responds to coherence. Coherence means the signal is clean, one state at a time, no internal contradiction, no competing broadcasts. When the signal is coherent, reality has something clear to respond to. When the signal is conflicted, reality mirrors that conflict. This is the part most people miss. Trying to fix an emotion is not neutral. It adds tension. It adds urgency. It adds a layer of self-opposition. The body senses this immediately. Muscles tighten. Breathing becomes shallow. Attention narrows. The system prepares for threat, not resolution. So while you think you are calming yourself, you are often broadcasting strain. Reality hears the strain. This is why effort does not create stability. It creates oscillation. You push toward calm, then rebound into anxiety. You force optimism, then crash into exhaustion. The constant correction prevents the state from completing its natural cycle. Nothing settles because nothing is allowed to finish. A signal that is not allowed to complete becomes fragmented. A fragmented signal persists. This is not a personal flaw. It is a mechanical outcome. Think of it this way. If you interrupt a sound wave repeatedly, you do not create silence. You create distortion. The same principle applies here. Emotional signals require uninterrupted movement to resolve. Interference extends them. Resistance sustains them. The irony is that the harder you try to stabilize yourself, the more unstable the signal becomes. Stability does not come from fixing. It comes from allowing clarity. Clarity does not mean liking the state. It does not mean agreeing with it. It means not adding another agenda on top of what is already happening. It means letting one signal exist at a time. When you stop correcting the emotion, something subtle occurs. The body relaxes its opposition. The nervous system shifts from defense to processing. The signal begins to organize itself rather than scatter. This is often experienced as relief without explanation, a softening, a quiet moment where nothing dramatic changes, but the pressure drops. That drop is not accidental. It is coherence returning. And when coherence returns, the field adjusts. You may notice that situations stop escalating. Conversations de-escalate without effort. Timing improves. You feel less pulled to act compulsively. Reality begins to feel more responsive. Not because you are controlling it, but because the signal it receives is no longer distorted. This is why some people seem grounded even in difficult circumstances. They are not suppressing their states. They are not performing emotional correctness. They are allowing one signal at a time to move through cleanly. Their calm is not forced. It is unopposed. And because it is unopposed, it is coherent. The field recognizes coherence immediately. It does not require repetition or intensity. A clear signal, even a quiet one, carries more influence than a loud but conflicted broadcast. Every attempt to interfere with emotion reduces clarity. Every attempt to manage, control, or override adds noise, and noise delays resolution. This does not mean you should indulge every impulse or act out every state. Action is a different layer. What matters here is internal interference. The moment you stop arguing with the state internally, the signal stabilizes on its own. You are not meant to eliminate emotional states. You are meant to stop distorting them. Once you understand this, a profound shift occurs. You stop asking, "How do I fix this?" and begin noticing what happens when you do not interfere. You stop measuring progress by emotional comfort and start recognizing clarity as the true stabilizer. The field does not need you to try harder. It needs you to be clearer, and clarity cannot be forced. It emerges the moment you stop adding effort to something that was never broken. Every intervention carries intention, and every intention shapes the signal. When the intention is control, the signal fragments. When the intention is allowance, the signal aligns, and alignment is what reality responds to. Nothing stabilizes when you are fighting yourself. Stability appears when the fight ends, not because you fixed the emotion, but because you finally stopped interfering with the signal that was already moving toward resolution. Your emotions are not reactions. They are coordinates. There are moments when anxiety appears without a clear reason. Nothing is wrong. Nothing has happened. And yet the body tightens. There are also moments when joy rises quietly. No achievement, no announcement. Just a lightness that was not planned. Most people try to explain these moments. They search for causes. They trace memories. They analyze triggers. But explanation is not where clarity lives. These states are not predicting what will happen next. They are showing you where you are right now. Emotion is not a response to the future. It is a reading of position. You are not feeling anxious because danger is coming. You are feeling anxious because your system is currently aligned with a stream of possibility that contains threat-based patterns. You are not feeling joyful because something good is about to happen. You are feeling joyful because you are already standing inside a range of possibilities that support openness and expansion. This is the shift most people never make. They treat emotion as commentary. In reality, it is navigation, Every state that moves through you carries information about which layer of reality you are intersecting with, not symbolically, functionally. The body senses alignment long before the mind forms interpretation. This is why emotion often arrives before thought. The system reads the field first. Language follows later. Think of it as location awareness rather than emotional reaction. The same way your body knows when it is upright or off balance without needing analysis, it knows when it is aligned or misaligned with its current environment. Anxiety is not an alarm about the future. It is feedback about position. Joy is not a reward. It is confirmation of resonance. Sadness is not failure. It is a signal of closure. Frustration is not weakness. It is an indicator of friction between intention and available pathways. These states are not instructions. They are data. When you treat them as commands, you lose orientation. When you treat them as problems, you lose signal clarity. When you treat them as information, something changes immediately. You stop arguing with the state. You stop dramatizing it. You stop asking, what is wrong with me? Instead, you ask, where am I aligned right now? This question does not demand action. It invites awareness. Awareness alone shifts position. The moment you recognize a state as a coordinate rather than a verdict, it loosens its grip, not because you rejected it, but because you understood its function. The body relaxes when it is not being misinterpreted. This is why reading emotion correctly is more powerful than managing it. Management implies control. Reading implies orientation. Control creates tension. Orientation creates choice. When you know where you are, you do not panic. You do not rush. You do not force movement. You adjust naturally, subtly, often without conscious effort. This is how experienced navigators move. They do not fight the current. They read it. The field operates the same way. Every emotional state is a coordinate in a larger map of probabilities. Some coordinates are dense, some are open, some are transitional. None of them are permanent unless you fixate on them. The problem is not the coordinate. The problem is identification. When you say, I am anxious, you collapse the coordinate into identity. When you say, I am sad, you freeze a passing signal into a self-description. This creates stagnation, not because the emotion is heavy, but because the position is no longer allowed to change. Coordinates are meant to shift. Identities resist movement. This is why naming emotion too quickly can trap you. The name feels stabilizing, but it often locks the system into place. The body senses this and tightens further. But when you say anxiety is present, something different happens. The state remains a location, not a self. Movement stays possible. This is not semantics. It is mechanics. The field responds to movement, not labels. When you allow emotion to remain informational, it completes its role quickly. It tells you where you are aligned, then it steps aside. When you turn it into a story, it stays. Most people try to change their emotional state in order to change their reality. This is backwards. The state is already showing you which reality stream you are intersecting with. You do not need to fix the state. You need to recognize it. Recognition does not freeze you. It reorients you. This is why sometimes just noticing a feeling without commentary causes it to soften. The system has been heard. The signal has been read. There is no need for amplification. And when the signal completes, the coordinate shifts, not because you forced it, because coordinates are meant to move. This understanding removes urgency. It removes fear. It removes the belief that you must act immediately to escape discomfort. Instead, you trust that position awareness precedes natural adjustment. You begin to experience emotion as navigation rather than noise, as guidance rather than disturbance. Not guidance about what to do, but guidance about where you are standing. And when you know where you are, the next step becomes obvious. Not intellectually, somatically. You feel which direction carries less resistance. This is how alignment actually works, not through vision boards, not through affirmations, but through precise reading of internal coordinates. Emotion does not tell you what to chase. It tells you what you are currently resonating with. Once you understand this, the relationship with emotion changes completely. You stop fearing uncomfortable states. You stop clinging to pleasant ones. Both are just locations. You do not live in a coordinate. You pass through it. And the moment you stop demanding that emotion give you answers about the future, it does exactly what it was designed to do. It informs, it adjusts, it releases. Emotion does not tell you what to do next. It tells you where you are now, and that is enough. Because once you know where you are, you no longer move blindly. You move with orientation, with subtlety, with timing. The field does not require dramatic shifts. It responds to accurate positioning. Every emotional state is a point on the map. None of them are destinations. Read the coordinate. Do not become it. And the moment you stop asking emotion to solve your life, it quietly helps you move to the next alignment without resistance. That is how navigation replaces struggle. That is how clarity replaces urgency. And that is how reality responds without being forced. Nothing stays if you stop interfering. You have felt this before. An emotion that lasted for hours, sometimes for days, not because it was overwhelming, but because it never found an ending. You may have assumed it meant something was wrong, that the feeling was too strong, too deep, too complicated. But the truth is simpler. The emotion did not stay because of its power. It stayed because its movement was interrupted. Every internal state follows a natural arc. It rises, it peaks, it resolves. This is not philosophy. It is how oscillation works. When a wave is allowed to move freely, it completes itself. When it is blocked, redirected, or repeatedly interfered with, it fragments. Fragmentation does not create rest. It creates persistence. This is why emotions that are resisted tend to linger. This is why emotions that are analyzed tend to repeat. This is why emotions that are judged tend to harden. They are not failing to leave. They are being prevented from finishing. Most people never experience the full cycle of a feeling. The moment something uncomfortable arises, the mind steps in. It questions, it labels, it explains. It tries to make the feeling smaller or more acceptable. In doing so, it pulls attention away from the body and into narrative. That shift is interference. The body begins a process. The mind interrupts it. When interruption happens once, the cycle slows. When it happens repeatedly, the cycle never completes. The emotion then appears to be chronic, when in reality, it is unfinished. You do not suffer because you feel. You suffer because feeling is not allowed to end. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of emotional experience. People believe relief comes from removal. In reality, relief comes from completion. Completion requires space, not effort, not control. Space. When an emotional state arises and you do nothing to change it, something remarkable happens. The nervous system adjusts on its own. The chemical surge peaks. The intensity shifts. The state begins to dissolve naturally. But this only happens when there is no resistance and no amplification. Resistance tries to push the state away. Amplification feeds it with story. Both prevent completion. This is why distraction only works temporarily. The feeling disappears while attention is elsewhere, but returns the moment focus comes back. The cycle was paused, not finished. This is also why rumination exhausts you. The body tries to resolve, but the mind keeps reopening the loop. Nothing is wrong with the emotion. The system is simply not being allowed to close the process. A natural cycle does not require understanding. It requires permission. Permission is not indulgence. It is non-interference. You do not need to dive into the feeling. You do not need to suppress it. You only need to stop stepping into its path. This is subtle. And because it is subtle, most people miss it. They think allowing means encouraging. They think not interfering means giving in. But allowing is neither. Allowing means staying present without agenda. It means letting sensation move through the body without commentary. It means noticing the rise and fall without trying to manage it. When you do this, the body recognizes safety. Processing resumes. The cycle completes, often faster than expected. This is why some emotional releases feel almost anticlimactic. You expect something dramatic. Instead, there is a sigh, a softening, a quiet return to neutral. That is completion. The mind often feels disappointed by this because it expected a breakthrough. But the body does not need drama. It needs resolution. Resolution is quiet. Most pain does not come from emotion itself. It comes from emotional traffic jams. As state begins, the mind blocks the exit. The system stays congested. Over time, congestion creates fatigue. It creates confusion. It creates the illusion of being stuck. But nothing is actually stuck. It is simply unfinished. When you stop interfering, the exit opens. This is why some people experience relief the moment they stop trying to heal. They did not find a new method. They removed the obstruction. You may notice this in small ways. A feeling you have been carrying suddenly fades when you stop trying to define it. A tension releases when you stop asking why it is there. A heaviness lifts when you stop narrating it. These are not miracles. They are completions. The body has always known how to finish its cycles. It does not need instruction. It needs space. This is also why forcing positivity can be so damaging. It cuts the cycle short. It leaves residue. That residue accumulates and resurfaces later as numbness, irritability, or exhaustion. Completion cannot be rushed, but it does not need to be prolonged. When you stop interfering, the cycle finds its own timing. This changes how you relate to emotional pain. You stop fearing it. You stop seeing it as something that will trap you. You trust that it has a beginning and an end. And because you trust the end, you no longer panic at the beginning. This trust alone shortens the cycle. The more you interfere, the longer it lasts. The less you interfere, the cleaner it resolves. This is not passive resignation. It is precise allowance. Allowance does not mean staying in the state. It means letting the state move. Movement is the key. Most suffering is not caused by emotion. It is caused by stalled movement. Once movement resumes, relief follows naturally. You do not need to push the emotion away. You do not need to hold on to it. You do not need to understand it. You only need to stop blocking its departure. When the cycle completes, something else appears. Not another emotion immediately. Often there is a pause, a neutral space, a sense of quiet clarity. That pause is important. It is the moment when the system resets, when the field recalibrates, when new alignment becomes possible. But this pause cannot appear if the cycle never ends. This is why allowing completion is not just about feeling better. It is about making room for the next state to emerge. When cycles complete cleanly, states flow naturally. There is flexibility, adaptation, responsiveness. When cycles are blocked, everything feels rigid, heavy, repetitive. You were never meant to carry emotional states indefinitely. They are visitors, not residents. They arrive, they inform, they leave. Interference turns visitors into squatters. When you remove the interference, they go. Most of what you call emotional pain is simply unfinished motion asking for an exit. Give it one. Not by doing something, but by not doing anything extra. Nothing stays if you stop interfering. And most of what hurts is not the feeling itself, but the endless effort to make it something other than what it already is. Let it move. Let it finish. What remains afterward is not emptiness. It is space. And in that space, reality reorganizes without force. That is not something you create. It is something that happens when you finally step out of the way. Clarity bends reality faster than intensity. You have lived this contradiction. Moments when you were fully committed, emotionally charged, determined, certain, and yet everything felt scattered. Results arrived inconsistently. Timing was off. Outcomes dissolved the moment you reached for them. Then there were other moments, quieter ones, less effort, less force. You were not pushing. You were not trying to prove anything. And somehow, without intensity, things aligned. Conversations resolved. Decisions became obvious. Life responded smoothly. This difference is not accidental. The field does not respond to how strong a signal is. It responds to how clear it is. Intensity is loud, clarity is precise. Most people are taught that power comes from force, from emotional charge, from wanting something badly enough, from amplifying desire, from holding intention with strength. But intensity often carries contradiction inside it. You want the outcome. You fear not getting it. You push forward. You brace for loss. These opposing states exist simultaneously. They may feel powerful, but they are not coherent. They generate mixed signals, and mixed signals confuse the field. The field does not interpret motivation. It does not decode effort. It does not reward struggle. It responds to patterns. A clear pattern does not need volume. It needs consistency. This is why a quiet decision can reshape an entire trajectory, while an emotionally charged declaration fades quickly. This is why people who are constantly trying to manifest feel exhausted, while others move steadily with minimal friction. Clarity is alignment without resistance. When a signal is clear, there is no internal argument, no push and pull, no hidden hesitation. The body, the breath, the attention, and the intention are not fighting each other. The transmission is singular. This does not mean the state is pleasant. Clarity can exist inside fear. It can exist inside grief. It can exist inside uncertainty. What matters is that the state is not being opposed internally. The moment you stop resisting what is present, clarity begins to form. Resistance creates fragmentation. Acceptance creates coherence. This is one of the hardest truths to accept. People assume resistance gives them control. In reality, resistance divides the signal. One part of you is experiencing what is happening. Another part is trying to make it stop. The field receives both, and when the field receives both, it cannot respond cleanly. This is why effort often backfires. The harder you try to escape a state, the more energy you feed into its opposite. The system becomes split. Split signals produce unstable outcomes. Clarity is not about choosing a better emotion. It is about ending internal conflict. A signal that is weak but unified carries more influence than a signal that is strong but divided. This is why subtle shifts matter more than dramatic ones. A small moment of genuine acceptance can realign reality faster than weeks of forceful positivity. A brief pause where you stop arguing with the present can unlock movement that effort could not achieve. Clarity bends reality because it removes interference. Interference is not external. It is internal opposition. When you stop opposing the current state, the system relaxes. The nervous system exits defense mode. Processing resumes. Attention widens. The signal stabilizes. Stability is what the field responds to. This is why people who appear calm under pressure are often more effective than those who are emotionally charged. Their calm is not absence of feeling, it is absence of conflict. They are not fighting their state, they are inhabiting it fully. Full inhabitation creates coherence. Coherence does not mean staying in one state forever. It means being fully in one state at a time. No splitting, no second guessing, no inner negotiation. When the state is fully inhabited, it completes naturally. And when it completes, the next state emerges with clarity. This creates flow. Flow is not speed. It is alignment. The field recognizes flow immediately. It does not require intensity to notice it. It only requires consistency. A signal that remains steady, even briefly, creates resonance. Resonance amplifies outcomes. This is why life seems to reorganize itself around people who are internally settled, even if their circumstances are difficult. Their internal signal is not being disrupted by constant self-correction. They are not trying to be somewhere else. They are fully where they are. That fullness is clarity. Clarity does not demand belief. It does not require understanding. It emerges when you stop pushing against the present moment. This is counterintuitive, especially in a culture that values effort and emotional drive. But emotional drive often carries fear underneath it. Fear of delay, fear of loss, fear of missing the moment. Fear splits the signal. When you allow fear to exist without trying to eliminate it, something changes. The fear becomes a single state instead of a conflict. The signal becomes coherent. The field responds not to fear itself, but to the clarity within it. This is why allowing a state is more powerful than replacing it. Replacing implies rejection. Allowing implies stability. Stability bends reality because it creates a reliable reference point. Reality organizes around what is consistent, not what is loud, not what is desperate, not what is forced. Consistency is quiet. This is why the moment you stop fighting your current state, the signal begins to clarify on its own. Muscles soften, breath deepens, attention settles, the body stops broadcasting contradiction. And as soon as the contradiction dissolves, the field begins to respond differently. Not with instant rewards, but with alignment, small adjustments, better timing, clearer feedback, less resistance. This is not magic. It is mechanics. A clear signal does not need to be strong. It needs to be undivided. The moment you stop opposing what is here, clarity returns. Not because you chose it, but because nothing is blocking it anymore. Clarity is not something you create. It is what remains when interference ends. And once clarity is present, even briefly, reality begins to bend. Not dramatically, not theatrically, but precisely in ways that feel natural, in ways that feel inevitable. Because the field has always been responding. It was simply responding to noise. When the noise fades, the response sharpens, and everything that follows becomes easier, not because you tried harder, but because the signal finally became clear enough to be heard. That is how clarity moves reality, not through force, but through coherence. And coherence appears the moment you stop resisting the state you are already in. The shift begins when control dissolves. There is a moment when you realize that managing your emotions has never brought the stability you were promised. You learn to control, to regulate, to hold yourself together, and for a while, it seemed necessary. It helped you function, it helped you survive, it helped you move forward. But then there comes a point where control stops working. Not because you lost discipline, not because you became weaker, but because the system you are trying to control has entered a different phase. You do not need to master your emotions, and you do not need to let them run wild. Both positions assume the same thing, that you are supposed to intervene. Control says, fix it. Surrender says, give up to it. But there is a third position that almost no one is taught. Non-interference. Non-interference is not passivity. It is precision. It is the recognition that the field already knows how to self-organize when the signal is not being distorted. It is the understanding that your role is not to steer every internal movement, but to stop interrupting the natural intelligence that is already at work. Most people think control is strength. In reality, control is often fear wearing discipline as a mask. Fear of losing stability, fear of being overwhelmed, fear of not knowing what comes next. So you tighten, you correct, you manage, and the field responds with resistance, not as punishment, as feedback, because the field does not organize around effort. It organizes around clarity. Control introduces tension. Tension fragments the signal. Fragmentation prevents reorganization. This is why letting go feels dangerous at first. The mind associates control with safety, but what it does not realize is that control was only useful in earlier stages. When the system becomes more sensitive, control becomes interference. There is a moment when the nervous system is ready to regulate itself, when the internal architecture is mature enough to process without micromanagement. If control continues beyond this point, it blocks evolution. This is the moment many people misinterpret as collapse. They feel disoriented, uncertain, less driven, and they panic. They try to get their old intensity back, their old certainty, their old sense of command. But that version of control no longer fits the system they are becoming. The field is asking for something quieter, not surrender, not force. Stillness. Stillness is not absence. It is alignment without effort. When you stop intervening, something unexpected appears. A pause. A space where no one is fixing the signal. No one is judging the state. No one is trying to redirect the flow. This pause is not empty. It is active. It is the point where the system recalibrates itself. Think of it as the moment between breaths. You do not force the inhale. You do not force the exhale. The body knows when to move. If you interfere, breathing becomes strained. If you allow, rhythm returns. The same principle applies here. When you stop correcting emotional signals, they organize themselves. The nervous system settles. The signal becomes coherent. And when coherence returns, the field responds automatically. This is not theory. It is observable. People often notice that the moment they stop trying to control how they feel, situations resolve on their own. Not dramatically, subtly. Timing improves. Conversations soften. Decisions clarify without pressure. They did not choose a new reality. Reality reorganized itself. This is the critical shift. You do not select reality through willpower. Reality selects itself based on signal clarity. When the signal is clear, the field aligns. When the signal is distorted by control, the field reflects distortion. This is why non-interference is so powerful. It removes the distorting layer. It allows the signal to be what it is, fully and cleanly. No suppression, no amplification, no correction, just presence. Presence is not effortful. It is receptive, and receptivity is what allows reorganization. At this stage, doing less accomplishes more, not because you gave up, but because you stopped blocking the mechanism that was already functioning. Many people struggle here because control feels like identity. They ask, if I am not controlling, who am I? If I am not fixing, what is my role? The answer is simpler than expected. You are the one who stops interfering. When the fixer disappears, the signal stabilizes. When the manager steps aside, coherence emerges. When the controller relaxes, the system breathes. This creates a still point, not numbness, not detachment, a grounded quiet where nothing needs to be adjusted. From this still point, movement resumes naturally. This is the paradox. The more you try to choose reality, the more it resists. The moment you stop choosing, reality begins choosing again. Not randomly, precisely. It selects pathways that match the clearest signal available, and when you are not interfering, that signal becomes clear by default. You may notice that effort becomes unnecessary, not because you stopped acting, but because action emerges at the right time. You move when movement is needed. You rest when rest is required. There is less internal debate. Debate is noise. Clarity is quiet. The field responds to quiet clarity faster than to loud intention. This is why the shift feels subtle. There is no dramatic breakthrough, no declaration, no emotional high, just a sense that things are falling into place without force. This is what self-organization looks like. It does not feel like control. It feels like alignment. You are not being passive. You are being precise. You are no longer injecting personal urgency into a system that operates on coherence. The mind may still want to intervene. It will offer reasons. It will suggest improvement. It will try to reclaim authority. This is normal. It learned control as survival. But you do not need to fight it either. You simply do not follow it. And as you stop following the impulse to interfere, the still point deepens. The signal stabilizes further. The field responds more consistently. At some point, you realize something fundamental has shifted. You are no longer trying to make life work. Life is working with you, not because you mastered the process, but because you stepped out of its way. This is the moment where reality stops feeling adversarial, not perfect, not effortless, but responsive. You did not choose a better timeline. You became clear enough for the appropriate one to emerge. That is the difference. Control always tries to force an outcome. Clarity allows the outcome to select itself. And when the signal is clear, selection happens naturally. The shift begins when control dissolves. Not because you surrendered power, but because you discovered that power was never in control. It was in coherence. And coherence appears the moment you stop interfering with what already knows how to organize itself. Nothing needs to happen now. If you are still here, there is a good chance you have noticed it. Not a new emotion, not a breakthrough, not excitement or relief, a settling. Something quiet has replaced the urge to understand. The pressure to do something with what you heard has softened. The need to decide has stepped back. What remains is not empty, it is stable. This is important. Most people are trained to move immediately, to apply, to act, to convert insight into effort. But this moment does not ask for movement, it asks for preservation. What is happening now is not an idea forming, it is an alignment stabilizing, and alignment does not require belief. You do not need to agree with anything that was said, you do not need to remember it, you do not need to explain it to yourself later. None of that is necessary. This adjustment works only if it is left alone. Belief would already be interference. Analysis would already be interference. Trying to recreate the feeling would be interference. This is not something to hold on to. It is something to not disturb. You may notice that the mind wants to step back in. It will offer commentary. It will ask what this means. It will try to label the experience so it can be stored. This is normal. The mind does this to regain orientation. You do not need to fight that either. You simply do not follow it. Because what is happening now is not happening in thought. It is happening beneath thought, in the body, in the rhythm of attention, in the absence of internal friction. This is the still point. The still point is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It does not feel like an answer. It feels like nothing is being pushed, and that is why it works. Most people break this moment by trying to make something out of it. They return to old patterns of effort, old interpretations, old urgency, and when they do, the field responds accordingly. Not as punishment, as consistency. The field always organizes around what is sustained. If urgency returns, urgency is reflected. If tension returns, friction returns. If forcing returns, resistance returns. But if you do not return, something else continues. This is the simplest instruction that is never given. Do not go back. Not to the old explanation, not to the old pressure, not to the old habit of fixing yourself. You do not need to go forward either. Forward implies effort. This moment only asks you to remain unavailable to the old state. That is enough. The field does not need constant input. It does not need reminders. It does not need affirmation. It responds to continuity, to what is held without force. When you do not break this stillness, the system continues reorganizing on its own. Decisions clarify later. Movement returns when needed. Opportunities appear without being chased. Not all at once, not dramatically, naturally. This is how reorganization actually happens, quietly, incrementally, without announcement. You may notice that things you used to worry about no longer pull your attention. Not because they are resolved, but because your relationship to them has shifted. You are no longer broadcasting urgency about them. That absence is not neglect. It is clarity. Clarity does not need to be defended. It holds itself as long as it is not challenged. This is why the instruction is so minimal. Do not break it. Do not try to improve it. Do not try to explain it. Do not try to repeat it. Just do not return to the old way of being with your inner state. That is the only choice here. And it is a subtle one. You may wake up tomorrow and feel different, or you may not. Neither matters. What matters is that you do not interpret either outcome as success or failure. Interpretation would pull you back into effort. Let the signal remain quiet. Quiet signals are not weak, they are precise. The field responds to them with accuracy. Most people miss this because they are waiting for confirmation. They want proof that something is happening. They want a sign. But signs come after stability, not before. When you stop checking, the system settles further. This is the paradox that defines this entire process. The more you watch it, the more it collapses. The less you interfere, the more it unfolds. This is not surrender. It is restraint. Restraint from returning to old habits of inner engagement. You may feel an impulse to share this with someone, to explain it, to translate it into language. You can, if you want, but notice whether that impulse is calm or urgent. Calm sharing does not disturb. Urgent explanation does. You will know the difference. This is how sensitivity develops. Not through control, but through listening to what disrupts coherence and what preserves it. The still point teaches you without words. It shows you that you do not need to constantly manage yourself. That reality does not require continuous direction. That alignment, once reached, does not need reinforcement. It only needs to be left intact. And this is where most transformations quietly fail. Not because they were false, but because they were interrupted too soon. Someone felt a shift, then rushed to act on it, felt clarity, then tried to use it, felt stability, then tested it. Testing breaks it. You do not test alignment. You let it integrate. Integration takes time, but not effort. If you do nothing special, it continues. If you return to the old state, it dissolves. The choice is simple, but it is not loud. And that is why it is easy to miss. So if you are still here, let that be enough. No ritual, no declaration, no next step. Just the quiet understanding that something has already adjusted, and that adjustment does not need your help. Sometimes the most powerful act is not choosing a new direction, but refusing to return to the old one. And sometimes that refusal is all the field needs, because once the signal remains clear long enough, reality reorganizes without being asked. It always has. Nothing needs to happen now, except not going back.